consider that acuity is the refined clarity of thought and perception which enables one to discern subtle truths.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's podcast on politics and culture at the Acuity. And I'm blessed and privileged to have Amy Hamm, our communications manager, who's going to lead us through a bit of a review of the month of March. And we'll talk about a few hot button topics this week. So thanks again for joining. Like and subscribe and do all those kinds of things. And please feel free to leave comments on things that you'd like us to talk about or a direction that you want us to go. So, Amy, thank you so much for being here. How are you? Tell me about the last week. What's been happening in your life?
I'm doing good. It's been good. It's the Easter long weekend right now. I'm sure this will be published after this, but so that's sort of what's on my mind is like what's happening over the Easter long weekend. There are more birthday parties and there will be a turkey dinner with my family. I had this funny conversation with my sons in the context of the Easter Bunny because every year, so my youngest just turned 7, my oldest is 9, and I always do up a big Easter egg hunt and I fill their an Easter basket with eggs and like 1 or 2 toys. So my youngest, for some reason, my oldest was like, what do you believe in? Like, what about the Easter Bunny? And then he started listing off, he's like, okay, yeah, like Easter Bunny, yes. Jesus, yes. Satan, no. God, no. Tooth fairy. And then he kind of looked at me because he has his first wiggly tooth right now. So I could tell that he was like, oh, should I say I don't believe in the tooth fairy? Because I might get some money soon. So he's like, tooth fairy? Yes.
That is so cute. That is amazing. It's funny you mentioned Easter baskets. I have them. They're sitting in front of me here in my office, and my wife, God bless her, she's so incredible. She set everything up in these little Easter baskets for the kids. And my daughter, before I went to work earlier, she opened the door and was like, hey, are you coming up? And I was like, yes, I'm coming up. And then she said, I want to come down and see you. I was like, okay, sure, come down. She came downstairs and she opened the door and she saw them and she's like, what is this? I was like, oh no, what a huge mistake. Yeah. That was terrible. My poor wife upstairs, so profoundly unimpressed. Like, what's wrong with you, dude?
Big mistake. No. Have you figured out how you're going to manage this crisis?
A lot of distraction. It's like, oh, yeah, there was something there, but don't worry about that. Let's color. Oh, yeah, but don't worry about that. Here's a popsicle. And try and put it out of her mind and see how it goes. But it's failing. She's asked about like a half a dozen times. So.
Oh, no. That reminds me of one time, I think I was 5 maybe, and like my dad had this genius idea because I used to search for presents for Christmas, and he's like, I'm going to hide them all in Amy's closet. It's like at the top of my closet. And I found them. And I remember my mom being like, what the hell is wrong with you? Do you think that's a good idea?
Yeah, well, that's what parenthood is like for anyone who's looking forward to it. Yeah, lots of little mistakes along the way.
Yes. Are you doing anything for Easter?
Not technically, this is not our Easter. This is the Western Christian Easter. Okay. So our Palm Sunday will be this Sunday when everyone is celebrating their Easter Sunday, and we're just 1 week off this year. But even still, like I got an ice cream cake for the team at work, and like I'm very happy to celebrate with all my Christian friends who are celebrating. But for us, the weekend after, we're gonna have it's a huge weekend. Yeah, so it's a lot of partying. It's and we do it. In a sense, I hesitate to say properly, but Good Friday is supposed to be a commemorative day, right? Not a celebratory day. So a lot of people choose to celebrate Good Friday as Easter, and that doesn't make a whole lot of sense because it's literally when Christ's human form passes away. So it's a little bizarre. But on Easter Sunday itself, we're going to celebrate really hard. Yeah, lamb and a spit and the whole Greek shebang.
Oh, nice. That'll be lovely. Okay, so on our schedule, we have a really full schedule. We're going to discuss a lot of things in sort of rapid fire. I tried to pick out the top sort of 5 moments or news stories over the last month, and it's really hard to do that because the world is a little bit insane right now. Like everything seems to be going to crap. So maybe we'll start with some there are a couple things in Canada, and then we'll go international, and the last one will go back to Canada. So number one, Alberta separatists say they now have the 1,732 signatures they need for a referendum for Alberta independence. So this petition that was filed in December of last year, it proposes a referendum question that asks, quote, "Do you agree that the province of Alberta should cease to be part of Canada to become an independent state?" And what happened before this was that Alberta Premier Daniel Smith had changed the rules about how you can trigger a referendum. It used to be that you had to have the signatures of 20% of the province's population. She made it so that you now need 10%. And so this group, Stay Free Alberta, is saying they have that 10%. And it looks as though there may be a referendum in October asking that question. And so as we know, Premier Daniel Smith, she did change these rules, but she has not stated her outright support for Alberta independence. And we know even, Pierre Poilievre hasn't either. He's said he doesn't want that for Canada. Daniel Smith she hasn't outright said she doesn't want it. She's sort of been a fence sitter, I guess, on the issue.
It's a tight line for them to walk. I commend them both because, a good portion of the base of the Conservatives is keen on this. So, if we think, for example, that the average percentage of Canadians who are conservative are between 45 and 50%, polls that I've seen supporting a secession of Alberta peak at about 30%. So that's, basically 2/3 of Conservatives kind of want that, at least in Alberta. So it's a really difficult situation for them to navigate because as politicians for the country of Canada, they have to be pro-Canada in its entirety. So I think they both handled it really, really well. What is the percentage chance that you think this will succeed?
I don't think it will. And I know, there are polls about support of Albertans for whether or not they want this to happen. And so right now, 70% of Albertans, according to latest polls, support remaining as a part of Canada. And then only 21% are saying that they support separation or joining the U.S. So that's a big difference. Like the idea of number one, separation or joining the U.S. Those are two very, very different ideas. And the fact that only 21% of people, and how is that divided amongst those groups?
So the apply market, as we see here, is really interesting. The chances, I agree with you. I think that it is less likely to pass than it is more likely. And I would say that, the polls and apply market are probably pretty close. I would say that it's probably close to 10 or 15% chance that it would pass.
I think so. And you might consider it a strategy of Smith to have changed the rules and dropped the percentage of Albertans required on the petition from 20 to 10 as saying hey, I'm going to make it easier for this referendum to happen. And then it will sort of quash the separatist movement entirely. Exactly. And that might be what she's doing.
Totally. Make it easier. Let the question come and then we can deal with it and move on. So it's a smart play either way. And I think 20% is a pretty high requirement for a...
That's a lot.
And it's not necessarily for a referendum, but for a question posed by the public. 20% is a very large number. If 10% of people want one question answered by government, that's a pretty sizable proportion. So, if only 30% of Canadians vote, if 10% of them want a specific question answered, we should be able to do that.
That's huge. And it's not like any sort of online petition where you send it around the world and random people and maybe bots are signing up for a petition. This is a petition where you actually have to show that you're a resident of Alberta and that you can vote in the referendum. So it's huge to be able to even get, 20% that would be very difficult. 10%.
Yes.
I'm actually surprised that they've done that from between December and the end of March. I think that's kind of impressive. So we'll see what happens. But I think both of us are betting that it won't. We've aligned with the poly market. Maybe we should risk it all right now and just be like, yes, it's going to happen. Let's put all our assets into saying yes if we want to be risky. Okay, our second topic. This is a really fascinating one. The Canadian Bar Association has called out what they said was an unnamed journalist, but it was clearly columnist Jamie Sarkanak from the National Post for her column about a judge, Faisal Mirza. So the Canadian Bar Association is essentially, they've attacked the freedom of the press in Canada with this public statement that they released, suggesting that journalists should not be allowed to criticize the judiciary. So this is the column that they reacted to. And let me read a little bit of their statement, which is very terrifying. But maybe while I'm looking through that, you can describe what is the Canadian Bar Association, what is their role, what is their purpose and importance in the country?
Yeah, so it is a trans-Canadian association of lawyers. As an organization, it is not a regulator in the strict sense, like each of our provincial bar law societies or bar societies. That being said, they do have standards that most provinces will adhere to. And perhaps one of the most common, most important ones is the Code of Ethics. So it's actually quite an important organization. And, I don't know the details of the article and how much it vilified the decision by the judge. And I think that, like you framed it wonderfully, because freedom of the press is foundational freedom. It's an incredibly important component of a free society. That being said, the Canadian Bar Association and lawyers in general have a responsibility to maintain the trust in the judiciary and legal system more at large. So, it's kind of like competing things there on the one hand. And I would say that the lawyers and law societies across Canada do a really good job of defending individual rights. If I'm going to be honest, during COVID, they were far, far more lenient and accepting of people's views and their commentary and their own rules and policies within law firms during COVID than, for example, the College of Physicians and Surgeons. So they do a pretty good job trying to walk that line. This is a tough one. That's a tough question to try and get to an answer.
Maybe what I will do is I'll read a little bit from Jamie's article, and this is what she said about the judge, and then I'll get into this media statement. So Jamie was talking about this judge, Faisal Mirza, who his signature move, she said, is letting violent men walk free because of quote unquote racism. And she describes him as one of the architects of race-based sentencing in Canada. He was appointed to the bench by former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in 2022. His flourish of race-based acquittals is not a case of a judge gone rogue. She says it's instead perfectly on brand. And she talks about how back in 2001, when he wasn't even a lawyer, he was arguing in the Osgoode Hall Law Journal that mandatory minimum sentences for drug and weapons offenses would be racist because they would disproportionately impact Black people. And then getting it, later, he said that Toronto police statistics were racist because they showed that Black individuals comprised 51% of drug arrests, 82% of mugging arrests, and 55% of purse snatching arrests. He said it was evidence of over-targeting. And then he concluded that mandatory minimum sentences would exacerbate this sort of racist effect. And then she says that this becomes a career pursuit for him. When the Supreme Court was looking on whether or not to strike mandatory minimum sentences back in 2014, he was an intervener in that case. And, he made an argument, and then the court ultimately ruled that mandatory minimum sentences were unconstitutional. And then she gets into some of his actual cases, which include, there's so much to go over here, but I'm trying to just highlight some of the most insane stuff. So one is in 2024, Mirza decided the case of a middle-aged Indigenous man who had sexually abused his girlfriend's daughter, who was between the ages of 11 and 13, by forcibly kissing her, fondling her breasts and genitals, sexually assaulting her with his mouth. The Crown asked for a sentence between 4.5 and 5.5 years, but after Mirza considered the impact of colonialism and racism, he settled on 3 years. And then last year...
Interesting.
Yeah, interject if you... Yeah.
No, keep going with your with your examples.
One more example. 2025, he presided over a case of a Jamaican Canadian pimp with a history of criminal activity. He trafficked a semi-homeless Indigenous woman. And then, so this judge, he said the starting point for the sentence would be 5 years. He shaved a year off to address the man's personal circumstances, primarily racism, which cumulatively put the offender at a higher risk for negative decisions and involvement in crime. This
is interesting. This is a big topic. You know, in the strangest way, I think that everyone is correct. I think that Jamie's column highlighting this and how ludicrous some of these ideas and principles are to the general population is totally fair game. And I think that the criticism of these decisions, the criticism of the advocacy and the activism from the judge before they became a judge is worthwhile highlighting. That being said, the judiciary in Canada follows a series of laws, follows a series of precedent by the Supreme Court, and none of these things are surprising. And I very much doubt that any of these things are unique to this judge. They are also not egregious. So, like reducing sentencing by 15%, 20% might seem to the average person like that is quite a marked departure from what would be the norm. I think that there's an argument to be made about how big of a difference that is. And my friends in the criminal world, it's not my forte. My friends in the criminal world will often talk about how they raise these kinds of factors about a person's history, their racial background, their cultural background, the legacy of historical injustices that led to this history of this for this person, and so on. And it's famous around a particular case called Gladue and the Gladue factors that are used predominantly for First Nations and Indigenous populations.
Right.
And so the real criticism here that I think is much more warranted is about the judicial reasoning that is promoted and advanced in Canada, and not uniquely to this individual. That's how it strikes me. But to the average person, I think that Jamie's criticism is something important to hear and to reflect on, because not everyone has the exposure to the judicial system that maybe you or I do, right? And so these things are shocking. And his reporting is really important from a public service point of view so that people can be informed and then can push back and make decisions and voting and so on and so on.
That makes sense. I think ultimately you always have to fall back on general principles, and freedom of the press is such a huge principle. So even be that as it may, say every judge is doing this and it's happening for various reasons, the fact that the Canadian Bar Association issued this public statement, I think as sort of a warning towards other journalists. Don't you dare criticize us. And, some of the language that they used, where they said, Canada's justice system works because Canadians trust that judges apply the law impartially. It's well, it shouldn't work because there's trust in the system. It should work because the system actually works and is actually impartial and fair. It shouldn't be about trust. It should be about what you're doing. You gain trust through actions. And then they said what falls outside the bounds of constructive discourse is the attribution of patterns of personal bias to a judge for applying the law. And again, the term constructive discourse to me is sort of this weaselly term hate speech, where
it's a little
it can be
Orwellian.
defined as anything. Yeah,
totally.
So that
I see
that scares me.
That. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, you and I, our natural inclination, of course, is towards a greater sense of liberty. And the language in this statement, is a little harsh. I agree with you. The substance of the statement, I think, is mostly correct. Impugning the individual, although it may be warranted, is a reasonable thing for the CBA to stick up for.
Right.
I don't know if that makes sense. So that's why I say all parties seem to be correct here. It's the CBA's job to be hey, don't undermine this one individual, because suddenly, the cascading effects from that are going to be really bad. But on the flip side of to the freedom of the press point of view, Jamie's reporting is, quote unquote, not wrong. Right. And so you can't really limit the fact that like not only do they have a right, Jamie has a responsibility to chase good stories and, to be media between institutions and the populace. So, I mean, like, that's a good friction in society. That's what I should say. It's a good friction to have.
That's discourse is great. And I think there's also this idea where you question this is an institution coming to the defense of someone who's expressing sort of leftist and woke ideals with this focus and fixation on identity politics. And would the CBA be willing to come to the defense of a conservative judge? I really highly doubt
Great
that.
question. Yeah, it's a great question. It's a great thought experiment. But at the end of the day, I'm like, who and what warrants the most amount of criticism surrounding the story is Trudeau, the Liberal government, and leftist application of principles in a judicial system. So, I mean, like, those are the things that we should all have an abhorrence for. We should all be offended by those kinds of components of this. The fact that this, judge is continuing down the same path of activism that sort of like animated them before becoming a judge shouldn't be surprising, and it shouldn't necessarily even be condemned, because that's who they were. And what really should be condemned is the decision to appoint someone with this level of activism into the judiciary role to begin with. So, but now that they're there,
point. Yeah.
Too bad, so sad.
What do we have to do? And now that we can't seem to elect a conservative government that can sort of balance our judiciary, which right now I think the Supreme Court is highly biased towards liberal appointed judges. So God knows how many years it's going to take for that to change in Canada.
Yeah. Great topic. What else do you have? That's a really good one.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on. So the next one is Keir Starmer. He's the Prime Minister in Britain. He's with the Labour Party, and his government sort of seems to be unraveling right now. And two big things sort of happened in the last week. So number one was that the UK grooming gang inquiry, they've released this new terms of reference, and they've announced that they're going to specifically be looking at the role of ethnicity, culture, and religion in this scandal. So Starmer's government had previously been sort of suggesting that he didn't want to do this inquiry, and anyone who called for it, he was saying, oh, it's just you're jumping on this far right-wing bandwagon, including Elon Musk. But now he's agreed to it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what happened before was there were supposed to be more localized inquiries into this scandal, and now it's becoming this national thing, and it's going to be looking at institutional complicity in the scandal, and also looking at, like, essentially the Islam and immigrants and race, and that wasn't happening before.
The underlying foundation is that right-wing groups and particular influencers in the UK have said repeatedly that this was a problem predominantly caused by mass immigration of specifically Muslim men, and most of whom come from Pakistan. I've seen evidence all over the map. I've seen 80% of this comes from that demographic. I've seen a much smaller percentage of total sexual assaults come from that demographic, but they're harping on specific grooming gang patterns and so on. So I'm like, it's very hard to comment on like the actuality here. But the Labour Party and several Tories were against the idea of forming the large-scale inquiry, and that has failed under public pressure from Western influencers, including Elon Musk and others. And so now they have to. The incredible thing here is not only the embracing that this has to happen, but the 180-degree turnaround from Labour government saying that not only are we embracing this, but we are specifically looking at culture, religion, and ethnicity. And that is a tremendous indictment against them and the position that they had like basically 3 weeks ago. So huge indication that things have turned. They have, if I'm recalling correctly, a major sweep of elections that are coming in May 7th. And those elections are council level, and they are really, really important in the UK. Reform from Nigel Farage's party is going to end up likely winning a massive number of those. They're saying like 300 plus council seats. the Labour government tried their best to delay those elections because the current government under Keir Starmer is so profoundly, brutally unpopular, and it looks like everyone is trying to bless you. And it looks like everyone is trying to switch and change their stripes in time for these elections because the courts there said that you cannot delay them. So the politics in the UK is hot right now, really hot, and we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah, and the other thing that's happening is the UK has had this non-hate crime incident reporting with their police forces. And so recently the police have announced that they didn't really want to be doing this. It was at the behest of the government. And it led to things like a UK mother, Lucy Connolly, being arrested for a post she made on X, sentenced to 31 months in prison for what she said after the Southport stabbings. And then, similar story with Graham Linehan. He's a gender critical supporter of the women's rights movement for our sex-based rights. And he was arrested when he landed, I think in London. And again, just for his online commentary. And we've seen police in the UK knocking on people's doors for being reported by people who they had offended online. Like, it's just this completely absurd system where if you offend someone online, the police come knocking on your door, and it's not officially a crime. It's a non-hate crime incident reporting, but they would still use this language in their reports talking about like perpetrator and victim. And so they're finally moving away from that. And again, I think it's a really good sign even for Canada, in my opinion, that population of the UK, it's like I was afraid looking at what was happening to free speech in Britain, and it's like they're finally getting it.
Yeah. The problem is
turning
that
around.
If these kinds of policies succeeded, then they snowball to other locations. So when they pop up in a government that's so similar to ours, with a people that's so similar to ours, with the same struggles and same problems that we have, if these policies are allowed to continue without some kind of tremendous backlash, then that sets the stage for those things to continue elsewhere. So the same thing with Australia and their detention centers during COVID, and so on and so on. So many examples. So the fact that this has failed is spectacular. This is a massive victory for liberty in the West. The number that I had heard, the highest number I heard, was that 13,000 people a year were getting these incident reports, and then failing to address them can lead to fines, can lead to jail time, and so on and so on. That like this whole kind of enforcement apparatus can really come down on you. It has a chilling effect on what people are willing to discuss, where they're willing to discuss it, the nature of topics that can come up, and so on and so on. So I mean, like, this is at the very least insane, if not outright evil, and it has lost. So huge victory, like something worth celebrating.
I agree there, and I hope that Canada will follow suit. We've seen in the UK the trans insanity is ending there. And hopefully it will happen here. And
they were ahead on that, right? Like they were faster to end that. So
hopefully the free speech thing happens as well, because Canada has a major crisis of free speech right now. And we don't see as much police abuse in the same way with these non-hate crime incidents. What we see more in Canada is the human rights tribunals and people using that. But it's still that people weaponizing a government body to persecute people who said things that offended them. So I am hopeful that this is a major positive change. And Starmer's ratings, he's only been elected for a couple of years, and he was, of course, doing well when he was elected, and now he's just like rock bottom ratings.
Bottom. I think he is the least popular prime minister of the UK in history. I'm 90% sure that was the case, that his popularity in like certain polls has reached the lowest level of approval. That I don't know how he's still there. I don't know how the Labour Party has tolerated him. I bet you that they will do the same thing as Trudeau and Carney, that they will ride him out until the necessary point of election, change him 3 or 4 months beforehand, say we're turning a new page, and try to salvage as many seats as they possibly can. But I think that this is all too little too late. I don't think that they have a capacity to turn around this ship before it hits the iceberg. So good luck to him. Like, pardon my French. I don't like
Yeah.
to curse, especially not publicly. But fuck that guy, man. Absolutely fuck that guy. I hate Keir
Yeah.
Starmer. Yeah, what a
Yeah.
disgusting, wretched human being he is.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. Just his, he doesn't seem to be a principled man whatsoever, in my opinion.
Disgusting.
Yeah.
Spineless.
And I hope that Canadians will eventually start giving the same treatment to Mark Carney. We'll see
Yeah.
what happens. Okay, let's move on to number 4. So this one, again, there's a lot of stuff to talk about. So number 4, Iran and the Strait of Hormuz. So it's been a crazy week. Trump is threatening to bomb Iran back to the Stone Ages. He's saying if a deal isn't reached, then it's all bets off. He's being accused of war crimes, or at least threatening war crimes. He ruined a major bridge in Iran, and he's threatening energy sites. And there's this discourse where people are saying that this is the U.S., it's their cause, it has nothing to do with us. And going back to Starmer, he's also saying the same thing, like, this isn't my war, this is Trump's war. And then here's a column by Douglas Murray who's arguing that everybody should be grateful because what Trump is doing is actually something that benefits us all, and essentially something that would have had to have happened at
Exactly.
some point in time.
Yeah. So, I mean, I have no problem admitting that I have a personal bias, that I'm very much pro-Trump. I think that he's one of the greatest showmen the history has ever seen. I think he's absolutely hilarious. I think his comments, every week he gives a line that's just like Hall of Fame presidential line. It's spectacular how funny is his comedic timing. With respect to the war in Iran, one of the big things that people keep talking about is why. Like, why now? Why now? Was the threat imminent? In my opinion, these things are completely red herrings. It doesn't make any sense at all. Trump has outlined several reasons that are extremely reasonable and compelling as to why the intervention is now. It's been 47 years of a problem of state-sponsored terrorism that has to be dealt with. They're getting closer and closer, obviously, to getting a nuclear bomb. Negotiations with them, he has reached out multiple times. They have failed. They are at their weakest because Hezbollah, Hamas are destroyed. The Houthis are destroyed. They are basically isolated. Russia, who is a supporter and a backer of them, has been engaged in Ukraine for so long. Israel has huge amounts of intelligence that are ready and available. Trump is at his strongest with respect to his base. He has the political capital. He has the military might, et cetera, et cetera. So he has like a million reasons why now is a good time. Timing with respect to oil is another one. They just took over Venezuela. They're increasing their domestic production of oil. So the dependency that the world should have on Iran is at a very weak point. So go in there, destroy as much as you possibly can, make sure that you neutralize this threat as quickly as possible, and move on. So very, very strongly positive for it. The Strait of Hormuz, as if Trump and Hegseth and all of his Joint Chiefs of Staff was not considering that, oh no, there's going to be an oil shock because one of the largest producers of oil in the world is going to control this little strait and it's going to be difficult getting oil out. Of course, I mean, like, who wouldn't know that? You could probably find, at least 50% of poli-sci students at Dalhousie would have known that. So this is not brilliant grand strategy to think that oil prices are going to go up and the Strait of Hormuz is going to be under threat. So to me, everything with respect to the war in Iran is going exactly as one would have expected, and it's an extremely meritorious thing to have done.
Yeah, I can't. I'm not a huge Trump fan. I do have a MAGA hat.
Good enough.
Don't tell
good
anyone.
Enough. Yeah, good enough.
Yeah, but I do think he's hilarious. But I wonder how much of this is due to TDS or Trump derangement syndrome, because, like you said, I agree with most of what you said, and I think this was something that would have had to have happened eventually if Iran was trying to have nuclear weapons. It's just like at some point we had to face reality, and it's happening now, and it's never going to be easy. And just saying like, well, look at what's happening as a result. Yeah, like that's the side effect of conflict and war. That's just it.
What else is going to happen? Exactly. And
using a doctor metaphor, like, you don't attack your doctor. Well, he's giving me chemotherapy, but I'm puking and I can't eat and I'm losing weight. Like, yeah, that's what happens.
Right. Totally. People like to say, "Oh, how close were they to a nuclear bomb?" And then, like you have to have some trust in the U.S. administration and their intelligence when they tell you, "Well, they said that they have the capacity to have 11 nuclear bombs within, several days, and so they were not going to do anything to stop that." Then, with respect to their rocketry, a month ago, people thought that the maximum limitations of their ICBMs was 1,200 miles. Then they released one that went 4,000 miles into the ocean. So I mean, that could have struck London, England. So I mean, like the
Yeah.
level of threat is obvious if you are being even remotely objective. And then the last thing
Yeah,
is the revolution with the domestic population, which we've touched on before. If they killed
we have.
anywhere up to 30,000 people who were trying to revolt against them just a month and a half ago, well, obviously this is a great time to intervene because hopefully that passion still exists and you can replace the regime. So I mean, like I don't
Yeah.
see, as much as I try, what is the steelman of the opposition to Trump's conflict here. I don't know what
Yeah.
it is, and I try to find it, but I can't see it.
I still feel horribly for the Iranian people that, just like all of us, want to live happy and normal lives, get your job, get married, raise a family, do all of these normal things, and it's all been thrown into chaos because of this. And I think there are people in Iran. I saw a news story about people shooting at American planes because they're frustrated with the instability that's been caused by this war. So I get it. It's never easy, and conflict is never easy. And that's sort of where I'm sitting, is like, I feel really horrible for Iranian people because this sort
Totally
of
agreed.
relative stability has been totally
Yeah,
taken from them. And I can
yeah,
understand their anger, and I hope that it wasn't just that we weaken the regime and then, it still is an Islamic state
right.
afterwards. I hope that what happens ultimately is positive for Iran and the Persian people. But it's who knows at this point.
It's true. There's a lot of uncertainty. The fog of war is dense. We can't see that far into the future, but
Yeah,
we cross our fingers, make our prayers, and we hope that it resolves in the best way possible for all those innocents.
indeed we do. Okay, number 5. This just started happening today. It's really crazy. It's going back to Canada. And so this is, I'm just reading from a Grok summary on X. So Canada's Immigration Department drafted a citizenship study guide stating that many Black people were brought as enslaved and urging applications to consider this shameful Canadian past, which is, just like patently false when you look at the history of Canada. It's almost like, and so this is the minister, Lena, I don't know how to pronounce her last name, but
Metlej
so
Diab. Yeah, Metlej
thank
Diab.
you. Oh,
No
she's
problem
in
because
Nova Scotia, so I'm sure
yeah,
you hear
exactly.
about her
Yeah,
a
yeah.
lot.
Yeah, yeah.
And so through Freedom of Information requests, this Blacklocks reporter, they do great work there, have figured out that they were creating this pamphlet that was talking about like a history of slavery in Canada. And so, as they said in their reporting, no Canadian parliament legalized slavery ever. No father of Confederation was a slaveholder. Slavery was outlawed by the Upper Canada Assembly in what is now Ontario in 1793. The British Parliament followed Canada, oddly, because now we talk about like we need to follow Britain. But so the British Parliament followed with an 1834 Act for the abolition of slavery throughout the British colonies. Canada remains the only G7 country never to maintain overseas colonies, and most Black Canadians, 59%, were born abroad, with the majority arriving here after 1971, according to a 2024 StatsCan report. It's
Right.
just
So I
so
mean, like, yeah,
insane.
it's ludicrous. I mean, like, so she's a moron, and like most of the Liberal cabinet is. They're not particularly bright people. They're ideologically based, and I want to say that it was Thomas Sowell who has said that these are the kinds of things. These are the consequences where the demand for racism exceeds the supply. You can't
Yeah.
find it, but you want to so
Yeah.
badly. So you go out there and you make things like this, which are like fabricated and false. So okay,
Absolutely.
this will motivate
Which
her base and it will drum up some more passion from her followers, but irrelevant.
it reminds me of going into our moment of levity for the week. the idea that, you know, you have a dearth of racism. And that is what happened. Our funny endnote for the week, the NDP convention, where basically everybody in this group, they all turned on each other and started eating their own. And
God, I love this.
They made the party famous around the world for how stupid, insane, and just nasty they were. And this is from the Daily Mail. Everywhere around the world, people are mocking Canada. So the NDP, they're a dying party. They have 6 MPs in Parliament. They need at least double that to be an official party. And yet, so they held their convention. It happens every few years. They elected a new leader. And their convention, they had this equity card pass system. You can see here their new leader with a Palestinian flag behind him, no Canadian flags in sight. Like, just the amount of absurdity that happened over the weekend is so insane. But I
love everything about it. I'm telling you,
Yeah.
this is like such satire. You cannot write this. You know what I mean? Like, you can't write this.
That's Adrienne Smith. She's a lawyer. She's going to sue me now because I said she. This is a lawyer and was the chair of the convention, and that she's holding up what the original equity card was. They added more colors later, and it became this like evolving system where people who held up these cards could jump to the front of the queue during policy debates and speak above others. And then everybody just started fighting. Of course. Well, like, what else are you going to do? Because it's like, well, they let a white man speak. And then a trans woman is up there like, well, a cis woman spoke before me. And then, you know, people with disabilities, people who, you know, at one point there was like a disabled woman with a guide dog who's like, I have a problem with the fact that the caucus meeting for the disabled people is at 7 p.m. and that's really way too late for disabled people. I need to be in bed already. Like, it just evolved into a whole weekend of everybody complaining about how oppressed they were. It was so insane.
Yeah. I love
Unbelievable.
it. I think that, you know, this is because what this is right, like, it's a microcosm of the incompetence of these ideologies if broadened to a large enough sample, right? So societies cannot function like this, and this is why, you know, like, they cannot make their own convention functional. Imagine that they were in power. Imagine if they were in parliament.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's completely dysfunctional.
Oh my God.
And you know, Jordan Peterson famously says, you know, like, get your own house in order before you come out into the world and try to organize everything else, right? Like, get your own house in order. And they cannot. These people, they don't look mentally well. They don't look like they are high functioning. They don't look like they have, you know, great reasoning skills, and they're trying to pretend that they are a legitimate party that should be in some semblance of authority across an entire nation. But you don't deserve it at all. Like, look how you function. Look how you talk. Look at your policies. Like, you're just ridiculous. It's a clown show. It's a circus. So I love it. I absolutely love it. I love watching all these clips. I probably got 20, 25 messages from different people saying, like, dude, did you see this? Is this real? I had one friend of mine who was like, I didn't think this was real. I thought this was fake.
Yeah. That was my first. I had to cover this for the National Post. And so my first, when I started watching it live on CPAC, and my first tweet, and this was before the viral videos started going on the... Thanks, Mark, for that. Exactly. Like, what Mark just showed is like, the NDP was a trade unionist party. What the fuck are they now? They're just this, like, they're so... oh my God. But, okay, so I first started watching this. I'm like, this is an episode of Portlandia. It's crazy. And then, you know, within hours, the viral videos were going online. And then they also, maybe we can just show this Rob Ashton. He was one of the men who was trying to gain leadership of the party. And he just, in like WWE wrestling, 1990s wrestling fashion video, was screaming like, eat the damn rich. And everyone, we got to watch it.
I'm going to close this campaign the way I started. We're done being on the menu. And we're done with the ruling class eating us alive. It's time we take our seats at the table and eat the damn rich. I'm going to close this campaign.
You know, it almost seems, you know, it almost seems very literal. It almost seems sincere. Like, he must have A buffet of cooked human beings who are affluent.
The ironic thing, he's going to have to start by eating their newly elected leader, Avi Lewis, who's married to Naomi Klein, the rich, famous writer. And one time I was reporting on it too, and I was following, it was like a townhouse meeting after Mark Carney released his budget, and I went to this Zoom meeting, and I'm looking in the background, because I love fancy things, there's no shame in that, I don't think, but Avi Lewis, as leader of the NDP, should not, by his nature, love fancy things. But I noticed in the background that he has this really nice chair, and I'm like, I'm going to find out what chair that is. I will die before I don't find out what chair that is. So I did. And it was a pressed plywood Eames imitation chair, $570 for like a single plywood chair. I'm like, there it is. He's such a phony. Same as Jagmeet Singh, the previous leader, who was,
aren't they? They all are.
BMWs,
Exactly.
Rolexes.
Rolexes, right.
Fucking phonies.
Exactly. It's all virtue signaling. There is no virtue. It's just the signaling of virtue. Right? It's like a butterfly whose wings are designed to deceive, to make you look like a predator. It's not actually a predator. These are not people who care about the poor. They love the level of power, authority, and wealth that they get from the positions that they are in. And it's been like that.
They don't get it.
It's not even new. You know, like Karl Marx, till today, every iteration we've seen is exactly this. It's more and more of the same. People get into the position of authority by promising things to poor people, and they end up destroying everything and keeping as much as they can for themselves. Time and time again. I don't know of a single example where that wasn't the case. So more of the same.
Yeah, and so what you said about, if they can't master their own house, how can they master the whole country? And it was such a case in point that they show up at this convention and they're in a room of their own comrades, and yet they had to create these rules to find the bigots amongst them and the like people that would be victimizing them, discriminating against them. And that's the ultimate point, is that it's not about weeding out like who are the actual bad people. It's that there always has to be a class of oppressors and a class of oppressed people, even when you get all of these people in a room together. They're like, well, now somebody is my enemy. And it must be you, it must be you.
Right. Totally. The lines that they wish to draw on society do not exist. They cannot be drawn. So, people in upper echelons of society who are doing very well, they can be there for a short period of their lifetimes, and then they fall out of grace, out of luck, and then people come into those positions. And then, of course, the idea that one class of people is righteous and the other class of people, based on their affluence, is good and evil, is absolutely ridiculous. Good and evil runs through every human heart. People can go back and forth. People are tempted all the time. And there's absolutely no reason to think that replacing a class of affluent people in society with a poorer class is going to change anything about human nature or about society and how it runs. Like, it doesn't even make any psychological sense. So, we're very grateful for the levity and for the comedy associated with the NDP, because I love to see it. It's like one of my favorite things. Like, it's like going. It's just a source of entertainment. So thanks for that, Amy. Good job.
Yeah, no, it was fun. And you know what? It's positive to be able to laugh at the insanity. Like, we've reached a point in our culture where the entire world is laughing. So they have to admit at some point, everybody's laughing at you. The gig is up.
Yeah, it's the emperor's new clothes. Exactly, it's the emperor's new clothes. One person starts to laugh, and everyone's like, well, wait a second, the emperor is naked. And so, we should empower and we should embrace that. Yeah.
We're fast approaching that.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to another great week. And subscribe, message us, let us know what you think. And as always, thanks to Amy for putting all of this together. And Mark, you want to jump on and say hi? Looking sharp with that new haircut, Mark. There he is.
Yeah.
Mark, our fantastic producer. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful Easter if you're celebrating this week. Have a wonderful Easter next week, and we'll talk to you again soon.
My friends, let us consider that acuity is the refined clarity of thought and perception which enables one to discern subtle truths.